Joe Biden gave a town hall in your state last night. I believe it was your state. Do you consider Milwaukee part of Wisconsin?
I do, and I consider saving Milwaukee in general and Milwaukee public schools in particular from the reign of the teachers unions to be task number one in Wisconsin.
Well, good. And Scott Walker's been out there saying that. I'm glad you have that position, but I wanted to talk to you about his comments on the People's Republic of China and the Chinese Communist Party. First, let's go to cut number one, the president last night in Wisconsin.
I talked about it. I said, look, Chinese leaders, if you know anything about Chinese history, it has always been the time when China has been victimized by the outer world is when they haven't been unified at home. So the central, vastly overstated, the central principle of Xi Jinping is that there must be a united, tightly controlled China. And he uses his rationale for the things he does based on that. I point out to him, no American president can be sustained as a president if he doesn't reflect the values of the United States. And so the idea, I'm not going to speak out against what he's doing in Hong Kong, what he's doing with the Uyghurs in western mountains of China, and Taiwan trying to end the one China policy by making it forceful. I said, and by the he said he gets it. Culturally, there are different norms at each country, and their leaders are expected to follow.
What do you make of that, Congressman?
Well, in the first instance, I thought it was an example of what Biden was doing the whole night, which is rambling and failing to make a coherent point about policy in most cases. In the second case, however, if you take him at his word, what he's suggesting is that genocide, which is the official position of the U.S. government, that what is happening in Xinjiang province is a genocide, and his Secretary of State has said he's not going to reverse that policy, is merely a matter of a different cultural norm, which is, of course, absurd. In fact, the whole idea of human rights and why the United States plays a role in promoting human rights is that they are indeed universal and not obscured by cultural differences. And then the third thing, as we've talked about multiple times on the show, Hugh, is that I think this is our first big piece of evidence that the Biden administration is indeed going to subordinate human rights promotion to its broader desire to work with China on climate change. And that will be not only a tragedy for the Uyghur Muslims in Xinjiang province, but I think a shambles just for our efforts to deter China by denial in the Indo-PACOM region.
I want to repeat that my prediction is somewhere in the middle of this term, we are going to see the Deputy Secretary of State emerge from a Beijing conference proclaiming that in exchange for our recognition of the 9-dash line, they will reduce carbon emissions significantly in 2080. That's what's going to happen. But let's go in the meantime to cut 14, the president last night.
There will be repercussions for China, and he knows that. What I'm doing is making clear that we, in fact, are going to continue to reassert our role as spokespersons for human rights at the UN and other agencies that have an impact on their attitude. China is trying very hard to become the world leader. And to get that moniker and to be able to do that, they have to gain the confidence of other countries. And as long as they're engaged in activity that is contrary to basic human rights, it's going to be hard for them to do that. But it's much more complicated than that. I shouldn't try to talk China policy in 10 minutes on television.
Congressman Gallagher, to become the world leader, you must gain the respect of other countries. I don't think I've heard anything as wrong as that in a long time.
It really is shocking and very troubling. I mean, I guess I agree with his last comment that he shouldn't be talking about China policy in 10 minutes on TV because clearly he's not capable of doing it. I think they have a huge opportunity right now, however, to repair some of the damage. And something I hope we explore in the Nixon Library seminar that you're going to be leading, Hugh, is the fact that we should pressure our allies to boycott the 2022 Olympics. We introduced a resolution to that effect last summer. My understanding is you had Mike Waltz on the show to discuss his latest resolution, which is similar to that. Because if you look at the record of recent Olympics, honestly, it isn't pretty. I mean, the CCP famously used the 2008 Olympics as a global coming out party. And in 2014 at the Sochi Games, Putin used the international limelight to whitewash the invasion of Ukraine. And so I think we have a goal. We have an opportunity here in a bipartisan fashion to use the upcoming Beijing Olympics to put some pressure on the Chinese Communist Party for their egregious human rights abuses. And I just hope the Biden administration doesn't go down this path, because I know there are good people in that administration that have a clear-eyed view of the Chinese Communist Party and recognize how disastrous this would be.
Now, the Congressman Waltz was on yesterday, and the way I understand the Waltz option is this. Either the IOC moves the games or we boycott them, and the we would be us and the Quad and everyone else we can get to sign up. And by the way, I think the IOC would fold and NBC would fold and all the sponsors would fold if it was move or lose the Western markets. But we need the Quad, India, Australia, Japan to join us. We need other freedom-loving countries to join us. And I think that would work. I really do think that would work. But the Nixon seminar, I do have to correct you. The Nixon Seminar on National Security and Conservative Realism will be led by Secretary Pompeo and Robert O'Brien, not me. I'm not actually a member of it. I just know the people who should be a member of it. You're a member of it. Here is Secretary Pompeo on Fox with Martha McCallum yesterday talking about the Olympics. Cut number 10.
The Chinese Communist Party is engaged of an effort to eliminate an entire class of people, the Uyghur Muslims. This is genocide. This is what we know from the 1930s. You talked about the Olympics in Berlin in 1936. We ought not afford the Chinese Communist Party this propaganda victory. And I appreciate these athletes want to compete. They want nothing to do with politics. They just want to be out there doing their best on the world stage. And I have great empathy for them. That's why the International Olympic Committee has a responsibility. There's still almost a year. We can have these games someplace else. I'm sure we can find a nation that would love to host it, a nation that would really uphold the Olympic ideals. That's the thing that I think the administration should be working on. It should be working with the IOC and our partners all across the world to say, enough. We're not going to allow this kind of bad behavior to be rewarded by the privilege, the enormous honor of hosting an international Olympic competition.
To make this work, Congressman Gallagher, to make Secretary Pompeo and Michael Waltz and you and Rick Scott and everybody else who's been behind it, would require Tony Blinken, who testified that there was a genocide underway when he was confirmed, to work the phones immediately and to make the declaration immediately, because you can't put on a game, or they could postpone the games a year, which, by the way, makes some sense since Japan is going to move to this summer, 2021, and therefore, if you wanted to go 2 years and go to 2023 for the Winter Olympics, that would make some sense.
Yeah, and first of all, I just think Secretary Pompeo really hit the nail on the head in laying it out. And my apologies for misspeaking, Hugh. I just tend to assume that anyone who's occupied the, dare I say, Olympian height of the Wednesday 7:30 Eastern slot on the Hugh Hewitt show tends to speak with one voice. So I sort of confused you and him. But I just think Secretary Blinken would find a huge reservoir of bipartisan support for that effort on the Hill. There are a lot of Democratic colleagues of mine, particularly on the Armed Services Committee, who are passionately committed to the cause of human rights, and I think would join us in this effort. And so to the extent that the administration is interested in this, I'm more than happy to work with them. And I just think at a time when we have officially declared that what's happening in Xinjiang province is a genocide, it would make no sense to support the Olympic Games being in Beijing. I mean, the Olympic Charter proclaims that the goal of Olympism is to place sport at the service of the harmonious development of humankind with a view to promoting a peaceful society concerned with the preservation of human dignity. Well, that reality has been undermined by belligerent dictatorships such as the Chinese Communist Party, and the IOC has enshrined a sort of moral relativism that is deeply at odds with this charter of the Olympic Charter.
So do you think, last question, Congressman, you're on Armed Services with Michael Waltz. If you fellas bring this before HASC, the Waltz option, which is move it or lose it, would any Democrats agree with you to pass that resolution and co-sign with you?
I think so. I think we get a sizable chunk, particularly among the sort of younger generation on the committee. It would probably go through The Foreign Relations Committee, however, given just the jurisdictional and nature of it and the subject matter of the bill. But even on that committee, I think you would get a sizable number of Democrats. So again, I just think this is a huge opportunity for the Biden administration to correct some of the terrible statements that were made by the president last night in Wisconsin.
Congressman, great to talk to you. I need you to go get Matt Leffler to watch Ted Lasso, try and change that Packer culture around, believe, that sort of stuff, just believe. And I hope you can get that done up in Green Bay land. Thank you, Congressman. ReliefFactor.com. We got to send these